I didn't realize a family could break you without ever raising their voice. But the night my father told me to leave, with Christmas lights blinking behind his smile, I understood that some wounds come from the people who swear they love you. And in that moment, staring at the turkey he kept eating while shattering my world, I whispered to myself, survive this, Zara, and never let them decide your worth again. Zara stepped through the front door with a tired smile, hoping the house would feel like it used to, warm, full of noise, full of her mother's cooking. She had imagined her family rushing to greet her, asking about school, pulling her into the kitchen to taste something hot from the stove. But the moment she walked in, something felt wrong. The living room was quiet. The decorations looked rushed, as if someone had put them up only because they had to. And when she entered the dining room, the air felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Everyone was seated, but nobody looked up for more than a second. Her father nodded without emotion. Her mother kept rearranging the spoons as if Zara wasn't even there. Her older sister glanced at her, then turned back to her phone. Two aunts whispered something and then went silent, pretending they hadn't been talking about her. Zara stood by the doorway for a moment, holding her bag, waiting for someone to say, "Welcome home." But nothing came. Only Kato, her younger cousin, jumped up from his chair and ran to her. He hugged her tightly, like he had been waiting for her all day. Zara felt a small wave of comfort in that moment, because at least someone was happy to see her. But when she looked around again, she saw the same strange atmosphere. The chairs had been moved around as if they were trying to make space without including her. Her mother served everyone food, but didn't ask if Zara wanted a plate. Her father kept chewing, eyes fixed on the turkey, not on his daughter who had just returned after months. Zara pulled out a chair for herself, but even sitting felt heavy. Conversations stopped whenever she tried to join. Her sister talked loudly about gifts she wanted, ignoring Zara's presence completely. Her mother asked others about their lives but skipped over her like she didn't exist. Zara felt the sting in her chest. She wasn't expecting a party or a big celebration, but she had expected at least a little warmth, a simple smile, a soft, "How have you been?" Instead, she felt like a stranger at her own family's table. Like she had walked into a place where she used to belong, but now there was no space for her. And as she quietly ate the small portion she served herself, she wondered when home had stopped feeling like home. Halfway through dinner, when everyone was quietly eating, Zara's father picked up the carving knife and sliced the turkey like everything was normal. Zara thought he might finally talk to her, maybe ask how school was going, or at least pretend to care. But instead, without looking at her, without even pausing his chewing, he said in the calmest voice, "You need to move out next week. We've decided." For a moment, Zara thought she heard wrong. The room didn't react. Not a gasp, not a shocked face, not even a raised eyebrow. Her father kept cutting the turkey. Her mother reached for the salt. Her sister scrolled her phone. Everyone behaved like he had said something small, something ordinary. But to Zara, it felt like the floor under her chair cracked open. She stared at her father, waiting for him to explain, to tell her why. But he didn't. He didn't even look at her. It was as if he had told her to pass the water, not to pack her whole life and leave her home. Zara swallowed hard and whispered, "Really?" Her voice shook, not because she was weak, but because it felt unreal, like someone had pressed pause on her world while everyone else continued eating. Her mother finally looked at her, but there was no softness in her eyes. Only annoyance. "You're grown, Zara," she said, wiping her mouth with a napkin. "We shouldn't have to carry you anymore." Carry her? Zara blinked, confused. She worked 2 part-time jobs. She paid the electricity bill. She handled groceries most months. She even helped with her sister's baby shower costs. She studied late into the night, cooked when her mother was tired, cleaned the house when everyone else left their plates in the sink. What exactly were they carrying? Zara's heart felt heavy, but she tried to stay calm. "But I already help with the bills," she said quietly, hoping they remembered all the nights she stayed awake doing both homework and housework. Her mother didn't care. "You should build your own life," she added, waving her hand like Zara was complaining about something small. Across the table, her aunt whispered something to her husband, and they both nodded, as if they agreed with the decision. Like Zara had done something wrong by trying to succeed in school while supporting the house. Her father didn't offer a reason. Not even one sentence. He didn't say, "We need the space," or "We think you're ready," or even "We're sorry if this feels sudden." Nothing. Just the announcement, dropped like a hammer in the middle of a silent room. And as Zara sat there, surrounded by family who acted like her pain was invisible, she realized something painful. They hadn't made this decision today. They had been planning it, and none of them thought she deserved even a simple explanation. After dinner, when everyone got up from the table and the noise of plates and chairs filled the room, Zara stayed back to help clear up. She moved slowly, still trying to understand what had just happened. Her mind kept replaying her father's words, the coldness in his voice, the way no one cared. She felt like her chest was tight, but she tried to breathe through it. Maybe there was a reason. Maybe they would talk to her later. Maybe it wasn't as cruel as it sounded. She carried a stack of plates to the kitchen, and as she walked down the hallway, she heard voices coming from the living room. She recognized her father's deep voice and her older sister's soft laugh. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words made her freeze. Her father said, "Once she leaves, we can renovate her room for your baby finally." Zara stopped in the middle of the hallway, almost dropping the plates. His tone wasn't sad. He wasn't worried about her. He sounded excited, happy, like her moving out was a solution, not a loss. Her sister giggled and replied, "I've been waiting. The baby needs a proper room. Mom said it's better if Zara goes now." Zara's breath caught. So that was it. They wanted her room. Not her independence. Not her growth. Not her future. Just the space she took up in the house. Her heart fell so fast she felt dizzy. She leaned against the wall, holding the plates tightly so they wouldn't slip. For years, she had believed her family loved her in their own way. Maybe they didn't show it perfectly, but she always thought she had a place in this home. Now she realized they had been planning to replace her. Not emotionally, not symbolically, but literally. Her room was more valuable to them than her presence. Her father continued, not knowing she could hear, "She'll manage. She always does. And it's time we focus on the baby now." Zara felt her throat tighten. She had supported her sister so many times. Money, rides, babysitting, even covering some of the medical bills. She had never complained. She had always helped. And now they were pushing her out like she was an old piece of furniture taking up space. Her sister asked, "Do you think she suspects anything?" Her father chuckled. "She's too soft. She'll just leave quietly." Zara closed her eyes. She understood everything in that moment. They didn't push her out to help her grow up. They pushed her out because she was in the way. They didn't care about her future. They cared about convenience. And standing there alone in the hallway, Zara realized something even deeper. They never planned to tell her the truth. They never even planned to feel guilty about it. Zara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the wall, her mind still stuck on what she had overheard. She felt like the house she grew up in was suddenly unfamiliar. Every sound felt distant. Every shadow felt heavier. She was trying to hold herself together when she heard a soft knock on her door. Before she could answer, the door opened a little, and Kato slipped inside, quickly shutting it behind him. He looked scared, his hands shaking, his eyes wide, his breath uneven. Zara frowned and asked what was wrong, but he shook his head and walked closer as if he was afraid someone might hear him. He stood in front of her, twisting his fingers nervously, and whispered, "Zara, I need to tell you something. Please don't get angry. I didn't know who else to warn." Zara's stomach tightened. She had never seen Kato this frightened. She told him to sit and talk, but he stayed standing, too restless. He took a deep breath and finally said, "Your parents, they took a loan." Zara blinked, confused. "A loan? For what?" Kato swallowed hard. "Not in their name. In yours." She froze. Her heartbeat jumped. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Kato continued, his voice trembling. "It's a lot of money. I don't know the exact amount, but I heard them talking about it last month. They used your ID, your documents. Your father signed it, and your mom agreed. They said you wouldn't find out until later, after you moved out." Zara felt something break inside her. Her hands went cold. Her vision blurred for a moment. She whispered, "Are you sure?" Kato nodded quickly. "I saw the papers. I only saw them for a second before your father hid them in his drawer, but your name was on top. I recognized your ID number. I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe they would tell you." But tonight, after what happened, I know they won't. He looked down at his feet, guilt written all over his face. They're planning to push you out so you won't ask questions. And when the bank starts calling, they won't be the ones to answer. You will. Zara felt the room tilt. Her own parents, her own blood, had used her identity to take money. They weren't just pushing her out for space. They were pushing her out to escape responsibility. They wanted her gone before the truth reached her. Kato stepped closer and grabbed her hands, trying to steady her. I didn't want to keep this from you. You don't deserve this. You've done everything for them. And they still. He couldn't finish the sentence. Zara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Never in her life had she imagined that the people she trusted the most could betray her so deeply. And as Kato held her trembling hands, she realized this wasn't just about losing her home. It was about losing her family in a way she could never repair. Zara sat alone in her room long after Kato left, her mind spinning with shock and betrayal. She felt like everything she believed in, family, love, trust, had been pulled out from under her. She needed air, something solid to hold on to, something that still belonged to her. Her eyes drifted to the old wooden trunk in the corner of her room. It had been there since she was a child, filled with things she never touched anymore. She thought it only held old clothes, toys, and memories she had outgrown. But something inside her pushed her to open it. She walked over slowly, almost afraid of what else she might discover tonight. The lock was rusty, but it clicked open easily. When she lifted the lid, she expected to see the same old sweaters and forgotten shoes. Instead, she saw neatly arranged files, envelopes, and documents she had never seen before. Her breath caught as she noticed her grandmother's handwriting on a small note. Taped to the top. For Zara. When you need it. Her heart beat faster. She moved aside the clothes that had been covering everything and found a sealed envelope, carefully protected inside a plastic folder. Under it were 2 large brown envelopes with official stamps. She picked up the sealed one first. It had her name written in her grandmother's soft, familiar handwriting. Zara hesitated, then slowly opened it. Inside was a letter. Her grandmother wrote about how proud she was of Zara, how strong she was even as a child, how she deserved a future full of safety and choices. Zara felt tears forming as she read each word. Her grandmother's love wrapping around her like a warm blanket she didn't know she needed. At the end of the letter, her grandmother wrote something that made Zara gasp. I left something for you. Something to protect your future when others may not. Zara opened the next envelope with shaking hands. Inside were property deeds, legal documents showing ownership of a fully paid 2-bedroom apartment in her name. Her name. Not her parents'. Not shared. Hers alone. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. She had never even known her grandmother owned property. And now she realized her parents must have known. They had hidden this from her. They had kept her living under their control, while pretending she had nothing. The final envelope contained details of a trust fund. Money her grandmother had saved for her over many years. Money meant to support her studies, her dreams, her life. Again, everything was under her name alone. Zara sat back on the floor, clutching the documents to her chest. For the first time that night, something inside her shifted. The pain was still there, sharp, deep, but now it was mixed with strength. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't trapped. She wasn't empty-handed. Her grandmother had seen the truth long before she did, and she had left Zara everything she needed to stand on her own. The betrayal hurt, but the evidence in her hands gave her power she never knew she had. Zara sat in her room for a long time, holding the documents her grandmother left her. She felt a mix of sadness, strength, and clarity all at once. For the first time, she wasn't confused. She wasn't waiting for explanations or apologies. She finally understood that nothing she said tonight would change her parents' hearts. They had already decided she was unnecessary. They had already replaced her in their minds. So instead of fighting for a place in a home that no longer wanted her, she made a quiet decision. She stood up, grabbed her old suitcase from under the bed, and began packing. She moved slowly but calmly, placing only her important clothes, her books, the documents from the trunk, and a few personal things she wanted to keep. She didn't make noise. She didn't let a single tear fall. She didn't want them to have the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Every fold of every shirt felt like she was folding away years of hurt. When she finished, She zipped the bag softly and looked around the room one last time. This used to be her safe place. The walls still had faint marks from when she stuck pictures up in high school. The window still leaked cold air in winter. She had grown up here. But now, it felt like a stranger's room. A place she had already been erased from. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the living room. Her parents were on the couch, watching TV, laughing at something on the screen. They didn't turn their heads. They didn't ask where she was going. They didn't even pretend to care. Her father noticed her suitcase but didn't pause the show. He just muttered, "Good. Saves us trouble." The words stung, but Zara kept her face calm. She realized then that leaving wasn't losing. Staying would have been the real loss. As she reached the front door, Kato appeared from the hallway, his eyes red like he had been crying. He rushed to help her with the suitcase, holding it as if he wished he could stop her from going, but he knew she had to. He walked with her all the way to the gate. The night air was cold, but being beside Kato made it feel a little lighter. When they reached the gate, he stopped and looked at her like he was scared this was the last time he'd see her. "Please don't forget me when you make it," he whispered, voice shaking. "You're the only one who's ever been kind to me." Zara smiled softly, touched by his words. She squeezed his hand gently, then stepped out into the street alone. Not broken, not defeated, but finally free. Zara walked up the narrow staircase of the building her grandmother had left her. Her hands shook slightly as she held the key, a small metal piece that suddenly felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. She took a deep breath, turned the lock, and pushed the door open. Dust swirled in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, and the faint smell of old wood and paint reached her nose. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the quiet sink in. This place, this was hers. All hers. The apartment wasn't large, but it had a warmth that no house she had lived in before could offer. The living room was bright with sunlight, pouring in through the big windows that looked out over the city. She could see rooftops, streets, and tiny people going about their lives, but here, in this space, she felt untouchable. The sunlight felt like it had been waiting for her, like it knew she had been running from cold walls and colder hearts for too long. She walked slowly from room to room, touching the smooth surfaces, imagining what she could do here. The kitchen was small but neat, with cupboards that still smelled faintly of lemon polish. The bedrooms were empty, but she could see her life filling them slowly. Her books, her clothes, little plants, a desk where she could study without interruptions, and space to dream. Zara opened the small balcony door and stepped outside. The cold air hit her face, but it didn't feel harsh. It felt alive. The city spread below her like a canvas, the lights twinkling even in the fading afternoon. She leaned on the railing and closed her eyes for a moment. No one was there to judge her, to push her out, to make her feel small. She could breathe again. Really breathe, without fear, without the weight of betrayal pressing on her chest. She smiled faintly, realizing she didn't have to beg, didn't have to fight for a place to exist. Her grandmother had made sure of that. Everything she needed to start fresh, to build her life on her own terms, was here. Dust and quiet couldn't hide the fact that this apartment was a sanctuary. For the first time in years, Zara felt a small, steady flame of hope grow inside her. She could finally imagine mornings without fear, evenings without tension, and a life where she decided her own worth. She took a deep breath, letting the sunlight wash over her, and whispered softly to herself, This is home now." And in that moment, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by the power of having a place that was hers and hers alone. A month had passed since Zara moved into her grandmother's apartment. Life was quiet, steady, and for the first time in years free from fear. She had arranged her books, put up a few pictures, and even started small routines that made the apartment feel like her own. She was beginning to breathe fully again, to sleep without waking in panic, to think about her future instead of her past. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the bank. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, expecting perhaps a simple statement or a routine notice. But what she read made her stomach drop. Her parents' loan, the one Kato had warned her about, had defaulted, and because they had listed her as the guarantor, it meant she could have been legally responsible. Her heart pounded, and she felt a surge of anger and disbelief. They had tried to trap her, to ruin her name and credit while pretending nothing was wrong. Then she noticed an attachment in the envelope, a recording. Her father's voice, calm and deliberate, approving the loan. He had signed her name without her knowledge. The evidence was undeniable. Her mother's approval was also recorded in another clip. The betrayal hit harder than she had imagined, but this time she didn't panic. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She simply understood that she held the proof she needed. Zara sat at her small dining table, listening to the recording once, twice, 3 times. Every word, every inflection, made her realize how long they had been planning to throw her into trouble and hide behind her silence. But now it was her turn. Not to yell, not to take revenge, but to let the truth shine. She forwarded everything, the loan documents, the recordings, and all the correspondence, to the authorities. She didn't confront her parents. She didn't send angry messages. She didn't need to. The law, and the undeniable truth, would speak for her. She stepped back and let it happen. For the first time, she felt the power of justice without bitterness, the weight of truth without rage. Zara leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right. Her parents had tried to hide the truth, to manipulate her, and to use her as a shield for their mistakes. But now it was out in the open. The consequences were theirs. She had done nothing wrong. For the first time since that cold Christmas night, Zara felt completely free. Not just from the house, not just from the people who had hurt her, but from the fear and uncertainty that had shadowed her life. The truth had finally caught up with them, and she could move forward without looking back. One evening, months after Zara had settled into her new apartment, there was a loud knock at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart skipped a beat when she opened it to see her father standing there, his face pale and desperate. Behind him, her mother's eyes were red from crying, and her older sister clutched her phone nervously. Her father's voice shook as he said, "Zara, please. Let us fix this. We were desperate. You're still our daughter." Zara looked at him quietly. The same man who had casually told her to leave over Christmas, who had ignored her cries, who had plotted to use her name for a loan, now stood pleading. Her mother sobbed behind him, words spilling out, accusing her of abandoning them, of not caring about the family. They acted like she was the one who had hurt them, like they were innocent victims in the chaos they had caused. Zara felt a strange calm wash over her. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't make excuses or explanations. She just stood there in the doorway, her eyes steady, her body strong. She let their words wash over her, listening, but not letting them reach her heart. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't push me out to save yourselves. You pushed me out to use me." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And now that I survived without you, you want my life again." Her father's mouth opened, but no words came. Her mother sobbed harder, trying to reach for her hand, but Zara stepped back. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger was weak compared to what she felt now. She had built a life without them, a life where she could breathe, think, and exist on her own terms. She shook her head gently, almost pitying them for the first time, and closed the door firmly. Behind it, she heard them shouting, begging, crying, and protesting, but she didn't listen. She didn't need to. The door was not just wood. It was a barrier between her and the people who had betrayed her, a shield that kept her peace intact. As she leaned against the closed door, she felt a deep sense of relief. For the first time, she realized she didn't need anyone's approval, not even theirs. She had survived their betrayal. She had grown stronger. And now, she could live her life fully, without fear, without compromise, and without them controlling her destiny ever again. Months had passed, and Zara's life had settled into a rhythm she had never known before. Every morning, she stepped onto her small balcony, letting the sunlight warm her face as she tended to the little garden she had planted. Tiny green shoots pushed up through the soil, flowers bloomed in bright colors, and even the smallest leaves seemed to reflect the new life she had grown for herself. It was quiet, steady, and hers, completely and utterly hers. Kato came by often, the only family member who had stayed by her side when everything fell apart. He laughed easily now, no longer weighed down by fear or awkwardness, and Zara felt a deep gratitude for his loyalty. They would sip tea together, talk about their days, and sometimes sit in silence, just enjoying the peace they had both earned. He had been a small part of her past that remained unbroken, and she cherished that. Her job was thriving. projects she had started, once tiny and uncertain, now grew steadily, earning her recognition she had never dared to hope for in her parents' house. Her studies excelled, her mind sharp and focused, unburdened by constant interference or judgment. Zara had space to think, to plan, to dream. And for the first time, she realized her worth was no longer defined by anyone else. One morning, as the sun slowly climbed above the city skyline, she stepped onto her balcony, breathing in the crisp, fresh air. The golden light touched her face, and she looked at her hands in the soil, her garden flourishing beneath her care. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "They tried to throw me out of a home, but all they did was push me into my destiny." The words felt true in her bones. She hadn't needed their approval, their money, or their love to rise. She had built everything with her own hands, guided by her courage and the wisdom her grandmother had left behind. There were no charity checks, no foundations claiming her story, no recycled happy endings from someone else's imagination. This was raw, honest, real. Zara smiled, the breeze brushing her hair, the city awake below her, and felt a peace she had never known. She had survived betrayal, deception, and indifference. She had stepped out alone, unsure, scared, but ready. And now, she had everything she needed: her independence, her home, her future, and most importantly, herself. She bent down, touching a small flower, and whispered again, "I chose me. And that's everything." For the first time, she didn't need anyone else to define her story. She was the author, the builder, and the heroine of her own life.